Good morning, dear professors, dear chairman, and members of the Station Commission, as well as postgraduate students. Let me start today's master's dissertation defense. It was assigned according to the order. The chairman of the Station Commission, Doctor of Philosophy on Philological Science, Vibsanem Aynazarovna Arzieva, Associate Professor of Department of English Language and Literature of Nuku State Pedagogical Institute. The Deputy of State at Station Commission, Doctor of Philosophy of Mathematical Sciences, Alambekgenov Lemkvas Hasembayevich, Head of the Master's Department of Kargopar State of University. Members of the State at Station Commissions, Candidate of Pedagogical Sciences, Associate Professor Javad Aminbayevich Bambayev, Dean of the Faculty of Foreign Language of Kargopar State of University. Doctor of Philosophy on Philological Science, Gauhar Batirovna Joldasova, Head of Department of English Linguistics of Kargopar State University. Candidate of Philological Science, Binjumrat Lyumratov, Associate Professor of English Linguistics, Department of Kargopar State of University. Candidate of Philological Sciences, Dilbarta Jumratovna Hajieva, Associate Professor of English Linguistics, Department of Kargopar State of University. Gulzira Khubambayevna Kudurbayeva, Associate Professor of Distance Learning, Department of Nuku State Pedagogical Institute. Gulmira Abdullaevna Usianova, Associate Professor of Distance Learning, Department of Nuku State Pedagogical Institute. Utemratova Guzal Urgenchbayevna, Assistant Coordinator of Organization of Doctors Without Borders. And Doctor of Philosophy on Pedagogical Sciences, Difuza Kumratbayevna Shumambetova, Assistant of English Linguistics, Department of Kargopar State of University. And now it's time to announce undergraduate students. The first one is Abdganieva Rosa, with scientific work, The Peculiarities of Phraseological Unities in American English. Scientific advisor, Sitchanov Zhitker. Reviewers of this qualification thesis, Jolobekova Maryash, Candidate of Philological Science, Kargopar State of University, Tajirova Alia, Head of Department, Nuku State Pedagogical Institute.
Good morning, everyone. Once more, dear professors. Welcome to the defense of our dissertation paper for academic master's degree. And let me introduce myself. I'm Abdganieva Rosa, and my topic is the peculiarities of phraseological units in American English. If I translate it into Karagopar, İngiliz dilinin Amerikan variantları frazeologiyal birliklerin ziyartlığı. So, as usual, our dissertation paper has the following parts. The first one is, as usual, introduction, then 3 chapters, conclusion, and bibliography. The first chapter it consists of theoretical basis of the investigation of phraseological units. The second one is general characteristic of phraseological units, and the third one is about the peculiarities of phraseological units in American variant. The introduction part includes the following tasks. The first one is actuality. So, what is actuality of our topic? Nowadays, studying English is widespread in our country. Good knowledge of language, including English, it's not possible without the knowledge of phraseological units. The knowledge of phraseological units helps to improve our reading in fiction and publicity, and reasonable use of phraseological units that the speech more expressive and idiomatic. The subject of the research is the distinction in distinctions in lexicon of the British and American versions, and the object is the lexicon of both options. The next one is the aim of the master's thesis. It is to determine the characteristic features of phraseological units in various structural and semantic structure. The main task is to study a problem in methodological literature. The next one is to provide distinction in the English versions on an example of publications in the literature and publicity like newspapers and magazines. Next, I have used theoretical analysis, comparative modeling, and synchronous methods in our work. So the novelty is to attempt to show the uniform principle of semantic classification of verbal phraseological units and verbal phraseological units, and attempt to show the distinctions between English in America and English in Britain. So, before studying phraseological units, I wanted to stop in the history of American English first. In 17th and 18th century, settlers arrived in North America, and American English has been influenced in the language by Native American population. That is the beginning of the history of English language. So in 1940s, phraseology and the branch of linguistics appeared. And what is phraseology? It is a science about phraseological units, that is to say about studying combinations work to the complicated semantics which are formed with variable components. So what is phraseological units? Phraseological units can be defined as a non-motivated that cannot be freely made up when we are speaking. Here, phraseological units, in contrast to lexical units, have a number of characteristic features. First of all, phraseological units are always complex in composition. It means that the components of the phraseological units is not the same of the meaning of a phraseological unit. And the next is they are not always semantically indivisible, but this feature is characteristic for some phraseological units. It means that the whole meaning of the phraseological unit is the same as the meaning is one equal to one word. The next one is reproducibility. It means that we cannot freely make up phraseological units while speaking. They are as ready-made units. We use it and we use it in a ready-made form. The next important characteristic of phraseological units is stability or constancy. It means that one or another component of the phraseological unit cannot be replaced to another close meaning word. It is also related to grammatical structure. And the last one is presence of truncated form. It means that we cannot we can use in speech the cut of the first part of these phraseological units. For example, there is a Russian proverb like "Don't be born by beautiful, but be born happy." We cut off the first parts and we use the new aphorism like "Beauty is the source of unhappiness." We use both of them in everyday speech. Here you can see another examples for phraseological units that keeps the previous features of characteristic features of phraseological units. Like to get into deep water in Karakalpak, we have a phrase like "Klinca dayağı su, basına kıyınçılık su." And a friend in need is a friend indeed. It means dost basına üstünde bilinir. Keep the bucket, has bolu, lose one's head albro, hold one's hand, gözün ıslak turu. Here you can see phraseological units in context. For example, little Johnny says, "Mommy, mommy, my Ali Jen is dead." Mother, nonsense, child. She phoned me 5 minutes ago. Little Johnny, but I've heard Mrs. Brown to say that her neighbors cut her dead. Here, cut her dead means to rudely ignore somebody, not to die. West European and American scientists learned phraseological units as a part of stylistics, but Professor Vinograd made a turning point in the history that he, thanks to his huge works, phraseological units received a reasonable definition, and he divided phraseological units into three big groups. They are phraseological fusions, phraseological unities, and phraseological combinations. Except Vinograd, there are some other famous scientists who worked and classified phraseological units into groups according to their structural, semantic, and contextual structure. There are some examples that, according to Vinogradov's classification, the first one, phraseological fusion. This is the example for phraseological fusion. To be in the soup, it means to be in a difficult situation. As you can see, the components of these phraseological units are doesn't keep the real meanings of the components. And the next one, phraseological unity. The bottom line, it means the final result. As you can see, the individual components keep the real meaning, and they together created a figurative meaning. And phraseological combinations, an example for phraseological combination, iron nerves. It means to remain calm in difficult situations. This means that, as you can see, both components have the real meanings, very close meaning, as the meaning of phraseological unit. Let's turn to the next chapter. It's about verbal phraseological units. What is verbal phraseological units? It is a study combinations that has a verb in this grammatical center. And American scientist Smith writes that in the English language it is an entertaining combinations are creating like hang on, own up, and etc. These verbal phraseological units makes the speech more effective, more natural, more expressive. Even American journalist and poet Eugene Field wrote a playful poem called Over and Overworked Word. We wake up and make up, we wake up and take up, and use the word up when we can. We think up and think up. We kink up and shrink up and do up a shirt or a man. Like famous scientists Smirnitsky, Vinograd, and others in Krakow, the issues of physiological units were studied in the works of famous scientists like Birdu Muratov, Ishbayev, Norozbayeva, and Yusupova. And here you can see the classification of physiological units in Krakow by Birdu Muratov. He divided into four big groups. The first one, physiological adhesions, next, physiological units, and then physiological combinations, and the last one, physiological words. As you can see, tüyüstün iltihabı, ağzının yoksalı, burnun baltaşıklı, kıyağın iltihazalan. Here, tüyüstün iltihabı, it means here you can see the meanings of these physiological unities are different, but the real meaning of these components are different. And physiological units, here the examples: şah arkası, janın yetince, kanı haşu, janın koyarga şertabba. The meanings of these physiological units are individual components has a real meaning, and they together created a figurative meaning. Physiological combinations, mizan haklar, boyuzu, şakartimiz, kuzutunu. Here you can see from this example that the real meaning of these components are very close to the meaning of the physiological units. Physiological words here we can give examples from proverbs, sayings, aphorisms, etc. In Krakow, there are some physiological words like "Жақсы ісімен жақсы, қорқақ болбады", "Көз қорқақ болбады", өнерінің қол көріс, "Көрпеге қарай аяғын созды". And there are some examples for physiological units by Verda. Some böyle arığın keş vaxtda bildirmiş, şahslardan düşmanların kütürmüz halkışın poem by Verda. Keş vaxtda şoşqa-şoşqanı azılasıp şarğalimiz, bolğalimiz by Verda. This is the third part of our research paper, approaches to the study. There are three approach to study the physiological units. The first one semantic, the second one functional, and the third one contextual. In semantic, if we approach physiological units by semantically, physiological units have idiomatic meaning, and they are opposite to three words. Professor Vinogradov worked on this semantically. And functional approach, if we approach functionally to physiological units, there are specific word groups that they have equivalent word in a lexical equivalent word. And when we approach contextually, physiological units are used in specific context, not variable, as they are fixed in speech. And if we see some examples in a stylistic way, I have researched some synonymous polysemy and other examples for physiological units. And what is polysemy? It refers to the phenomenon of a meaning. It means that one word or phrase has multiple meanings. And I found out some examples in American variant for polysemy. For example, shake a leg, it means not only one meaning, it means to dance and to hurry. And in Karakalpak variant, hücmu means hareketi, hazırlanın. What is synonymous role of phraseological units? It means that close meanings with phraseological units with close meanings can be synonymous to each other. Here you can see some other examples. Here, the word deceive has lots of synonymous phraseological units. For example, to pull the wool over somebody's eyes. Also, it has another phraseological unit that can be synonymous to each other. For example, to throw the hooks, to play the advantages of somebody, to get a beat, and etc. And in Krakow, there are some synonym phraseological units for the word Kazalanu. For example, şiit bolu, kum bolu, sisbir hatu, basında şitu, karşısından kıyılı, ahiret geçülüyor, tağdır bolu, kısantası metu, bölge kuru, koşumu, halk kaza bolu. These phraseological units are all synonymous to each other. One of the central places in the study of phraseological units of any language occupied by the problems of variant and synonymy. The borders of synonymous connection of vocabulary and phraseology will narrow or broaden dependence on that as far as wide or narrow would be a concept is. It would be logical to suppose that defining the borders of one of these phenomena, it will be possible to set parameters, and second, defining one through other. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your listening and watching.
Questions, Rosa? What's your subject?
Subject?
Uh-huh.
The subject of our research paper is the distinction in lexicon of American and British variant.
The peculiarities of phraseological units in American English, yes?
Yes, the topic is peculiar.
From what kind of aspects do you analyze your research? Linguistic, social linguistic, or cultural, or etc.
Just linguistic. Linguistic and social linguistic.
Linguistic and social linguistic. Then, what peculiarities, what kind of peculiarities of phraseological units in American English do you define?
Here, eager to first the classification, the right classifications of phraseological units.
Cümleler aynı değil mi?
I found that some.
What's the difference between English and American? British differences in physiological units or yes.
British and American.
What's the main differences? Yes.
Main differences. Almost all phraseological units, the basis of they come from America, they come from British English.
Where is situated